Thanks so much for stopping by to check out this episode of Vintage Audio Review. In this episode, I am going to talk about this pair of Wilson speakers. This is what is known as the Puppy 2, and this is known as the Watt 3. Watt stands for Wilson Audio Tiny Tot. You could buy them individually, but we're going to mount them as a pair the way that they should be used. However, the Watt 3 could be used by itself without the bass response. So the Watt 3 was a standalone speaker, and apparently they decided they needed more bass, or some people needed more bass, and so they had the Puppy 2s. The Watt Puppy speaker line goes up to, I believe, a Series 8. Now, these were made between 1991 and 1995. The Puppy 2 sold for $57.90 a pair, while the Watt 3 sold for $67.50 a pair, I believe. So about $13K for the pair. Now, in today's money, that would be like going out and plumping down $27,000 on a pair of speakers. Now, Wilson is known for some really high-end speakers. In fact, I believe they have a pair of speakers that you could pick up if you have $250,000 to spend on a pair of speakers. But in this finish, they were about $13K. And the Watt 3 listed a frequency response of 58 Hertz to 18 kilohertz, and the Puppy 2 listed a frequency response of 28 Hertz to 125 Hertz. And I believe they're both rated at a 91 dB SPL with a 4 ohm speaker impedance rating. They are heavy, and that's one of the reasons why they're separated, because I was doing some moving around in here. And that guy, the Watt 3, weighs 60 pounds, and the Puppy 2 weighs 77 pounds. So they're much easier to move by themselves. Anyway, I want to go into kind of how they assemble and what they look like closer up. I'm going to bring up a picture of them with the covers removed. These covers are held on by Velcro, and it takes a little bit of work to get them on and off. And I do have a picture here I'll show you as to what they look like with the covers removed when the speakers are together. I'll show you the back of them and how they go together and this and that, and then I'll show you some data that I measured, and then I'll talk about my impressions of them after listening to them for a few weeks. So sit back and enjoy, I hope. So these are the speaker wires that connect to the Watt 3 that come out of the Puppy, and you can see how heavy duty they are, gold plated, and they're very big. You can see more of the speaker wire down there, and they are a hefty speaker wire, and they go to the Puppy 3s. In a moment we'll go look at the rest of the connections around back. Okay. So here we have the Watt Series 3 Puppy 2 combination with the grills removed. I just kind of wanted you to see what it looks like. We do have, according to Wilson, a 1-inch fiberglass inverted dome tweeter, and we have a 6.5-inch doped pulp cone mid-range, this guy right here. And for the bass, we have two 8-inch woofers. So this obviously is the rear of the Watt 3 as it sits on top of the Puppy 2. We do have a port here for the bass portion of the Watt 3. And the speaker wires coming out of the Puppy 2, these monster guys connect here to the 5-way binding posts. I don't really consider them much more than a 3-way binding post, but that's I guess that's another discussion one day. They are a tight fit for somebody with big fingers like myself to be able to get the torque to get those to stay. And anyway, aside from that, they do have a nice handle right here to grab onto and move them around with. They are sitting on top of some small felt pads on top of the Puppies that kind of keep them from scratching things up and staying put. They are not, there's no slots or anything. It's basically, it sets on top, and they are massive enough that they're really not going to be sliding around, apparently. So this is the rear of the Wilson Watt Puppy, and right here is where you would connect your amplifier. And if you wanted to bi-amp the speaker, you would remove this jumper here and you would connect to here for your bass section, for the puppy section, and you would connect to these terminals to go to the Watt 3 section of the speaker. And that would come up the top like where you had seen earlier. So moving up a little bit, we have our port here for the bass. The cabinets are very solid. I'm sure that won't really tell you they're solid, but indeed they are a very solid, very nice looking cabinet with these black piano lacquer finishes. And you can see kind of down below here where they do have adjustment points here for your balancing and leveling of the speakers, so you can do some adjustments on them to make them more level. So this is kind of a side view of the Watt 3 Puppy 2 combination as it sits on top of one another. And once again, pointing out the bass port is over here. You can kind of just see it right over there. That is the bass port, and kind of this is just the flow of it. I'm going to move it just a little bit to the side. So I moved it just to the side so you could see the little felt pads that the Watt 3 sits on top of, and there's, I believe, 6 of them total. What we are looking at here are the impedance plots that I measured for each Series 3 Puppy 2 speaker combinations. The serial numbers for each of the pairs are here and here. The real portion of the impedance, which is usually given in the spec, is this trace here. It's, I don't know, blue, purplish line. And the important thing to look at between the two sets of speakers is that they follow the same basic shapes, and values kind of are pretty close to each other. This guy right here, the minimum impedance, is at about, I'll call that 28 hertz. It's maybe 3.5 ohms. And at 30 hertz for this guy, you are at about 4 ohms. So they're pretty close to the minimum speaker impedance, which was 4 ohms. It does get as high to, looks like 11 ohms for each of the speakers here and here, although that's at maybe 15 hertz. You're probably not going down that low. The phase plots also follow the same basic shapes and have the same basic values between the two different speakers. This data shows that these speakers are fairly well balanced after all these years. And there is some other data down here. If you look right here, we see a value at 1 kilohertz, and it's 6.87 ohms versus for this speaker it's 6.49 ohms at 1 kilohertz. So they're pretty well balanced between the two speakers overall as far as their impedances. What you are looking at here are the frequency response plots that I measured for each of the Wilson Series 3 Puppy 2 speakers. It is an average of 3 measurements for each of the speakers, and then I apply 1/24 smoothing, which is shown right here. And each of the serial numbers for the speakers that were used are noted down here. The horizontal axis shows the frequency from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz, and the vertical axis is sound pressure level. The measurements are made such that a calibrated microphone is placed pointing down the center of the speaker at a height that is in between the tweeter and the mid-range. I adjust the amplifier to give me a pink noise level of about 2.83 volts RMS. I set the REW software up such that it gives me time to leave the room so that I'm not affecting the measurement. This response here at around 33, 34 hertz is a result of a suck out caused by my room. It is not the speakers. And my guess is the speaker would probably follow a line going like that. These other little suckouts may also be room related. I do not have an anechoic chamber. That is not in my card. So the best I can do is measure all the speakers that I measure in the same spot. And so that way I can compare apples to apples. Wilson spec'd these at a 91 dB SPL at 1 watt and 1 meter. I ended up taking an average of all of the sound pressure levels and dumped it into Excel and took an average, and I got 90.6 dB. So it came pretty close to what Wilson had predicted many years ago. Once again, I would like to thank my buddy Richard for allowing me to keep the Wilsons for several weeks to audition them and measure them and just look at them and listen to them. It was really enjoyable to have them here. As you can tell from the data, both the impedance data and the SPL data, both speakers tracked each other very closely. And for the most part, I would say these speakers are probably about 5 to 6 ohm speakers across most of the band. They go up, I believe, as high as 10 ohms and just a tad under 4 ohms at around 35 hertz, I believe. And both speakers tracked rather nicely. The serial numbers are 1 digit apart, which tells me they were probably made right after each other. And that may help explain why they are so well matched. Plus, I'm sure Wilson has great quality control. The sound pressure levels tracked very closely between the two speakers as well. I only do a single 1 meter on-axis test with my sound pressure level measurements, and that's mainly due to time, but it gives me a basic comparison between speakers of their sound pressure levels and frequency responses, because they're all kind of measured in the same spot in the room. That being said, as far as the sound of the Wilson 3 Watt Puppy 2 speakers, they sound great in my particular room. So basically, they were in front of the KEF 107s, and I obviously did not have the KEF 107s hooked up, but I just listened to those, and they sounded really, really, really good. They are one of the better speakers that I've listened to. Do I like them more than the KEF 107s? Well, you'll have to wait for the video where I do some A/B testing between the Wilson speakers here and the KEF 107. As far as the listening, I can tell you that the Wilson does have a better lower bass response than the 107s, and the 107s are very good with low bass. Neither speaker, in my opinion, would require a subwoofer except for maybe the most diehard of listeners, but they do have a little bit extra bass, and new things on the walls would vibrate with some of the listening that I did. And they do sound really good. Maybe I'll be able to keep them. I don't know. There's kind of a logistics problem. We'll call it a wife logistics problem. And I only have really one place where I could put them, which is right in front of the 107s, and I don't think that's going to work out. Such problems in life to have. Anyway, they are a great speaker. There's no doubt about it. And if you could pick up a pair for a reasonable price, they would be something that you probably don't have to move off from. So overall, the Wilsons are a great speaker, as you can imagine. They seem to cross all the T's and dot all the I's as far as what one looks for in a speaker. I think they have a decent sound stage, imaging, and they just sound really nice. There's not much that I could say wrong with them at all. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and I always enjoy hearing your comments. And until next time, I hope you will have a great day or night.